What is up, everybody? This is Marshall Lee of DonkeyJawProjects.com, and today we got another early bird Artcast for you. We're going to be talking about the big bad media, mainstream media, however you like to call it. And we're actually gonna tie it a little bit into comics too. Today I have Mr. Comic Book Black Belt himself, Russ, on. How you doing?
Fine, thanks.
And where can people find you, sir?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube as Comic Book Black Belt. You can go to russleach.com, comicbookblackbelt.com, or my book, onlydeathcansavus.com, and you can sign up for the email list there. And I won't be filling your inbox up with rubbish, so please do.
Awesome. And how is that awesome comic you're making going these days?
It's slow because I've got to provide content for my main clients at the moment, but I'm at the end of every day I'm stopping what I do for other people and then getting a sort of a half a page or a page of penciling in, because I've thumbnailed everything, so I'm penciling everything up and then onto the ink section. So the current job I'm on at the moment should stop at the end of next week, so I might have a couple of weeks to throw myself at it and maybe finish the pencils off completely.
Sweet.
But I've had some other clients sort of probe me for other things, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's coming on. Thank you.
Awesome. So that the thing you are working on, is that still the AI thing?
Yeah, Charisma AI. Yeah, I'm in the process of doing an original story for them, so I'm producing all the artwork for this one. But I believe they may have a part two of two of the books that I've converted for them to do. So they're probably going to come back with that as well. But it's a good thing. It's work, so can't complain.
And so you're saying that one's ending, but that one's going to kind of be ongoing, or no? Is this it?
Well, the Charisma AI as a client,
yeah.
Fingers crossed, it's ongoing. I mean, obviously, it depends on how well the product does. If the product doesn't go anywhere, then the project doesn't go anywhere. But if it continues to do well, they want to build a library, a substantial library. So they could keep me busy for quite some time. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah,
it's cool. Yeah,
I definitely taken a peruse on the site. It looks like some really good stuff on there.
Yeah, they've got some great stories. They're all European. The existing stories are from French, two French publishers. I really enjoyed the Vampires of London with Sherlock Holmes and the Vampires of London one. That was great fun to do as well. So hopefully that'll get a second part. So there's all the stories are multiple graphic novel length stories. So there's every possibility. So we'll see.
Gotcha. Cool. So recently, you and Fue did a who's known as Lucifer Storm now,
The man
did a video, and you were talking about a bunch of different things. And how often does that go on? Once a week or something?
We're going to do it every Monday night UK time. I think 8 o'clock we're doing it. So we decided we'd just get on and do it. You know, we wanted to review books that we loved. So then it's not like the latest book that's come out, although that might happen. But it's more about just reviewing things that we thought were worthy of some pointing out from our own personal perspective.
Yeah.
Worth is obviously a subjective thing. But yeah, we're picking out books to do that. But at the same time, we wanted a platform to just be us and maybe grump a little bit, you know, like love that thing from Family Guy, was it? You know what grinds my gears? I just love that expression, and it's done in a light-hearted way. We want to complain about things occasionally. It's our turn to be grumpy and old, but it's done in a light-hearted way. There's nothing too ideological or political about it.
Yeah, no, it was definitely fun to watch, and what better day to do it than the end of a Monday. But anyways, so one thing that I thought was kind of cool. I don't know if it was then or my video that you were just on, but you were talking about how you weren't such a big fan of journalism. um,
Current journalism.
Current journalism. Would you like
Yeah,
to expand a little bit about
I I
that?
think a lot of current journalism is repetition. Journalists, a lot of journalists, not all. There are still some fabulous journalists out there digging up stories, digging up truth, and that's what journalism is about. It's about truth, not the truth that you want to hear, not a biased interpretation of the truth, but the truth. And unfortunately, what happens is you get a lot of people that are supposedly journalists who are in fact just presenters, and they just regurgitate what they've been told to say. And also something that's been creeping in over a long time that you see across all the news networks is this insertion of personal opinion. I don't want the personal opinion of a journalist. I want the truth. And that kind of winds me up, because otherwise it becomes activism. And it doesn't matter which aisle, which side of the aisle you stand on. I'm really not interested in that. I suppose I'm a centrist at heart. I'm a libertarian. I want people to be free to do what they want. But at the same time, I believe we should all be responsible for ourselves. There's a measure of self-responsibility. So, for instance, what we're all going through at the moment with the whole beer virus. Yes, the government should be there to help us, because we've put that government in place. At least in democracies around the world, we've put those governments in place. We've trusted them. Whether you like them or not, whether you've been the person to vote them in, makes no difference. They are there, but they can't save us all. We have a measure of personal responsibility to ourselves, to our communities, to our families, to help out. I don't know how much of what I hear on the news about the whole thing is the real truth, because I don't trust journalism in the way that I used to as a young man. I just don't anymore. Doesn't mean I'd fly off into weird conspiracies. What I do is I take a measure of it, be responsible, and think, well, okay, if that is the case that's going on, if I am being told the truth, then I need to take these precautions and do things properly. So it's not about making a protest about your freedom, and it's not about, ridiculous conspiracy theories. It's literally just about taking some self-responsibility and doing what you think is the right thing to do, but also as safe as possible. So you need to be able to scan, as it were, the landscape of the world around you and the facts that are being presented to you, and make a considered opinion, but also be careful about other people. And it's about self-responsibility. I'm a really big fan of that. And I think journalism today, a lot of it just it doesn't support that. So, for instance, what we've been seeing over here is we've been seeing a lot of journalism crying about, the government has done this and the government hasn't done that, but very rarely coming up with any reasonable sort of alternative. It's just shouting. It's just a lot of shouting. And of course, I'm like I say, I'm after the truth. I want to make sure that if the government do things badly, that they're held to account and all those kind of things. That's what democracy is about. But just screaming at each other, and I see that everywhere. So it's not just the political stuff. Like I say, I'm pretty sort of even-handed across it. I see good and bad in everyone. Everyone has good and bad, and not everyone's completely evil. There are a few people, but I see things pretty even-handedly. But it does seem to spread across so many media, so much of the media. So it's not just political journalism, it's entertainment journalism as well, and comics journalism, if you can call it that in most cases. It seems like everything's I think this probably encapsulates what I'm talking about when I see people when I see the journalists attacking government or the institutions of government. And don't get me wrong, I'm a bit of a that might make me sound like, oh, the government does everything right. No, I don't believe that at all. I'm a bit of a chaos fan, to be honest. I'm an anarchist at heart. I want things to change, and I want the right things to happen. But I understand there's this to and fro. But just screaming at people doesn't help. And this sort of part of, for instance, entertainment journalism, comic book journalism as well, it's all about a gotcha. It's all about what can I throw at someone to make them look bad? How can I make them trip up on their own words so that I can get a story out of it? It's always so very negative. Yeah. And I think I'd maybe have a lot more time even for the repeating journalists if it wasn't all so damn negative. And the thing is that even the positive things, they find a way of spinning it and digging it at somebody. And I think it's part of what maybe is part of the weight people feel they're under. Turn the television off. Read a book. Read a comic book. That's the most important thing. Read a book.
Not a DC one, but read a comic book.
not one of those dark ones. Don't leave them for another day. Funnily enough, we're going to be reviewing Arkham Asylum, which is incredibly dark. But it's okay to pick those things out. So, for instance, the deconstruction of the hero in The Dark Knight and in Watchmen was a great thing, but you should never have then based the whole of your comic book writing on it from then on. That's a bad thing to do.
It's like, hey, we made a cool comic. Now let's everybody in the industry do the same exact thing.
Exactly. And I was watching a video about corporatism, and it pretty much picked up that point. It's like, well, the corporatism says we made money out of that, which means we must now supply that idea or make that idea apply to everything we do from now on, because we're bound to make money out of it. It's like, no, it was a creative decision, and it was a beautiful, brilliant creative decision to make you think about superheroes, to make you think about how the hero's journey, some of the cliches that come out of it, and then move on. It doesn't mean that you then have to write every comic book like that ad infinitum. And it's the same with news, and it's the same with journalism. It's all just so dark and looking at the bad side. And I know the world is a far more volatile place than you're aware of when you're young. But there are some really good things, and there are good things in people, and there are certainly great things in comic books and literature in general. And do take more of that in and less of the TV. I think that's my message.
Yeah, I think you and I are pretty similar on that. In the chat, we got some awesome people. How you guys doing? We got RBT has something to say. Hunter S. Thompson has a pretty spicy quote about journalists. Journalism is not a profession or a trade. It is a cheap catch-all for jack-offs and misfits. That is the PG version. Thanks for the PG version.
Hunter S. Thompson.
And then we got another Lucifer here who would like to chime in. He says, journalism is all about getting a reaction out of people. Which really
current journalism. Yes, current journalism is good. Journalism would be the search for the truth. And there's just not a lot of that going on at the moment. It's whether it's true or not, whether the things you hear from so much of TV journalism or even newspaper journalism is true or not seems to be coincidental or accidental compared to the headline that they want to run with.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much from what you're saying that I'm like, yes, and more yes. I mean, whether, and I might lose some subscribers here for this one, but whether you like Trump or not, I sit there and I watch these, coronavirus briefings, and I'm like, like you said, they're just trying to do a gotcha. They have no interest in finding out any information. And like, for instance, this whole thing with the Lysol, like, he was just talking about possible things that could help, and he just said, "Hey, is there any way that Lysol could be part of the solution?" I'm not Lysol, but like, is there any way that the alcohol or whatever could be part of the solution? And the journalist took that and ran with it for the whole next day. Oh, Trump is trying to tell us to drink Lysol. Like what? Like.
Well, so much, like I was saying earlier, so much of journalism these days is done through the lens of political bias.
Yeah.
And that's been allowed because there's been this trend of journalists, news presenters, whatever, being able to give you their opinion. You turn on the news and there's one journalist giving their opinion about a subject to another journalist, and you think, that's not the news. It's two guys in a pub. It's like a
YouTube video, like
what's going on there? And it's not good. And yeah, there's so much baiting. I mean, okay, I'll be thoroughly honest here. Yeah, okay, I think Trump is a bit of a dick, to be perfectly honest with you. But even a broken clock is right twice a day. So if somebody's right, well, even if you don't like them or you think they're an idiot, if they're right, you should just stand up, because what's right is right, isn't it? I know that's subjective as well, but don't just disagree with someone just because you hate them. Right. And the thing that America's caught with, this whole Trump derangement syndrome, and it does appear to be a derangement syndrome. It's like, okay, the whole point of democracy is it's representational, but it's also it's about having a majority. So you go with the majority. I mean, there's been plenty of times when I've not voted for someone, and or I voted for someone, the other person's won or whatever. It's like, well, okay, well, that's the government. That's what you live with. You have a kind of a social contract with the government. You pay taxes and they look after the roads, and sometimes they don't look after the roads well enough, and sometimes they take too much tax. Sometimes they don't take enough tax. But that's always sort of, none of us are perfect, and you've just got to live as best you can within the system that you're in. I get a lot of time to think about deeper things because I'm fortunate enough to have two things on my side. One, I work at home and have done for a long time. And I don't have a proper job, so I'm not a plumber or a builder or something like that. I draw for a living, so it's not a proper job. But if we're getting the sexist, it's not a man's job, but we'll get that part to one side. But I get time to think about that, but I also have an ability to kind of throw things out of my head and not worry about things. And it's given me the opportunity to think deeply. And so many people can't think deeply, not because they don't have these abilities or because they're in some way less than me. That's not what I'm saying. They're too busy living. They're too busy in the drudge. They're too busy in the grind of the everyday. And the kind of journalism we see doesn't help people lift their heads up and think about deeper things. It just says, no, everything's terrible, everything's bad. Keep going to work and paying your taxes, and it seems the whole system is that way inclined. But I think that the best way to deal with it is to be the best you can be. You can only change things so much, and I know there's some people that do change things radically, and they're very brave and they go out there and do what they do. But for the most part, most of us can only do a little thing. Well, the best thing you can do is be responsible for your own actions. Do good things when you can. Be the best person you can. Have the best family you can. Have the best community you can. Those are the things that you can change. If I can tell a story in a comic book and reach someone out there and it inspires them to do something, or it gives them a new idea, or even if it teaches them a new word, like I learned a vocabulary from comics when I was a kid, I've done my job. Right. And it's a good thing. It's that sharing, that communication, I think it's really important to try and lift yourselves up, emotionally, whatever. Just try and lift yourselves up, lift your chins up, look to the sky. There are good things out there, and journalism in general at the moment, all it seems to want to do is attack and just beat people up.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, you especially during a time like this, you look the only place you really have to look for the information that you need is the media, in some shape or form. Luckily, it is possible to find some things here and there, but it's really hard. And the masses don't necessarily want to look any further than whatever's on their, TV right away. But
no, it's hard for them. It's not an ignorance thing. It's difficult. You're working hard and you just slump down. You're doing 8, 9, 10 hours a day, maybe more. It's hard.
And so, you're looking for information. And luckily, I think I found some decent enough information by like local news and stuff like that, but like on the radio. But even still, even that's biased, and it's like you're trying to get the information, but all you're getting is like, people, like you said, people's opinions, like this whole, agenda. You're getting fed, and not only that, like you said, they focus on the negative, like this whole coronavirus stuff. Like obviously there's some pretty not so great things about it, but like that's all they focus on. They don't focus on all the people who are recovering. They don't focus on like, they don't tell you like everything about it, that like a holistic thing. No. They just tell you what they want you to hear to help boost whatever political party they want or whatever,
Yeah. I noticed that the other day on the numbers on the BBC. Is like they give you all the numbers, but they give you it in piecemeal, as in not in the same sentence or not in the same paragraph. And then the graphics underneath were like, so they had a certain number of deaths that day. Okay. And it was less than the day before. And it was less than the day before that. But all they gave you was what the total was.
Yeah.
Because it was a more shocking number.
Yes. Yeah.
That's everything you need to know. If all they're trying to do is shock you, then they're not interested in giving you the truth.
Yeah.
They're just interested in giving you their opinion of the truth. Yeah. And that's not what you want to see from a news program.
Which is kind of surprising too, because usually, well, it's not surprising because, they're kind of out for ratings and stuff. So, they kind of do that. But at the same time, it's a little surprising because there's some of these news media outlets that their ratings suck. Like nobody even trusts them anymore, but they still do that. Like change the way you do things. Maybe start putting some facts out there.
Yeah, well, I think the problem certainly happened in the UK when we celebritized newsreaders. I think it's Morecambe and Wise's fault. Morecambe and Wise were a comedy duo from the 70s, 60s, 70s. They'd been back in music hall. I personally loved them as a child. They're still very funny today. And they were the biggest thing on UK television. And they had Angela Rippon, who I believe was the first female newsreader on the telly. She might have been the second. It might have been, I can't remember the other woman's name. But she's certainly, very, very important and very, very, very recognizable. And on their Christmas show, they had a musical number where she started off reading the news, and then they pulled the desk away. She got up, and she was an incredible dancer and had incredible legs at the time. She started dancing and showing her legs off, and that was it. The following year, they had all the newscasters in some musical item, and that was it. That's when it all went wrong, because we celebritized the newscasters instead of them just being there in a tie or a dress or whatever and giving us the news. Like tapping there and then like reading the news, and now they're all opinionated. They're all biased by their political and socio-political viewpoints. Most of them seem to come from a privileged background, so they don't actually connect with the masses that they're speaking to in most part. Obviously, I'm generalizing here. There are always going to be people that, journalists that aren't like that and presenters that aren't like that. But in the main, that's what you see, and they're not connecting, and it adds to the this sort of like elite consensus about how the world actually is as against how the world should be as far as they're concerned. So I'm getting very deep. I I shout at the telly occasionally, but you know what, I don't get red in the face. It's like I say, what's most important is is that you be the best person you can be, self-responsibility, and enjoy your family and community, and the rest of it will kind of the world is. There's a guy called Tom Campbell who I listen to, and he's a physicist, and actually some of his ideas are in my books that I've written, and it's about the underlying nature of reality, and he talks about the possibility that we get the world that we deserve. So the better we are, perhaps the better the world will be. And of course, if that doesn't work that way, at least you've had the best life you can have while you're here. You know, you don't have to believe in the hereafter or heaven or religions or anything like that. But and you shouldn't do anything because you think you're going to get a reward. You should do it because it's the right thing to do, or because it's the kind thing to do, or because it's the best thing you can be. Yeah. So, you know, I just think I think when I rant about journalism, it's really a rant about negativity, I think. Yeah. And you've just got to see if you can get yourself away from that negativity.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much in there. You know, I just and I would agree too, like, you know, being, you know, just kind of the best person you can be. Like, I think that's a big part of what the whole point of all of this is. One thing too is, you know, some of these journalists, the stuff that they put out there. Sometimes I wonder if maybe they miss their opportunity for, you know, being a journalist. They should have maybe gotten into comics because they tell a lot of stories, you know, or any kind of, you know.
I think a lot of journalists are frustrated novelists. Yes.
So like, and that's one thing though too. Like, I mean, there is a certain point where like, you also don't want that in your comics to a certain degree, you know, like Marvel, DC. That's been the big complaints by certain groups, and you know. But there is a certain part of that too, where honestly, you can't get away from it. Most stories you read has some sort of bias in there, and you know, I was talking. We did a review. My buddy Robert and I did a review of this comic called Gogor about a week ago, and you know, I really enjoyed the comic. I love the sensibilities, the adventure and stuff, but there was definitely a little bit of a message in there, a little bit of politics or at least philosophy in there, and it was talking, you know, basically about socialism versus capitalism and stuff. And you know, like, I tend to be more on the conservative side, and capitalism tends to make sense to me to a certain degree. I mean, I think I'm also kind of where you're at, Russ, too, where I'm a little bit of a centrist. There's probably a strain of maybe anarchy in there too for me. But you know, I'm not like crazy on the fringe type, basically, is what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, you know, even though I'm kind of not super friendly to the idea of socialism, reading that book, you know, they kind of put it in a certain way where I'm like, okay, you know, that's interesting. You know, just considering that, you know, it creates that a little bit of empathy. You know, that's what comics, that's what art and stories do. They create empathy, and there's actually, I almost feel like if you do have a message you want to get out there, you're much better. You're going to make much more headway by putting out good entertainment, putting out, you know, make sure it's a good story, and it kind of discusses both sides, you know, and stuff. But, you know, if you probably shouldn't be a journalism if you have a certain, you know, thing you want to do. You should, unless what you want to do is to actually research and find, you know, the truth. That's what journalism, like you said, is about. But, you know, like I said, somebody like me who's way more on the conservative side or closer to capitalism, I was actually looking at that, and you know what it made me do? It made me, this whole week, I've been like reading about, you know, the difference between capitalism and socialism, trying to dig deeper into it to understand the whole philosophies behind it and stuff more than I already did. And, you know, it's pretty effective. You know, it made me think, you know.
I think as with everything, a genuine meeting of two minds, or a meeting of two opinions, is what's really called for. I mean, in the UK, we're not a socialist democracy, but we do have aspects of socialism. So we try to, when it works, we try to make sure markets are fair. You've got an NHS, you have the DHSS, you have like income for unemployment benefit, that kind of thing, and that's a whole that's an ethos that's about looking after people that have fallen on tough times. That comes up to the conservative argument of, well, if you look after people too much, they'll just rely on it. And when I say conservative, I wasn't particularly talking about a party. I'm just talking about the conservative end. And I think there's definitely a discussion to have around those kind of things, around socialism versus capitalism, and how actually a melding of the two and a kinder way of doing things, and not always looking for the most profit, but putting people in the primary position rather than profits, is where a good future would be, in my opinion. So what's important about that opinion to me is, and the building of that is the coming together of two polar opposites, and actually having a discussion and seeing where things can take you. And I think that's another problem that's been happening. You were talking about politics or ideology in comics, and I think the problem is that we have had politics in comics, and we have had philosophy in comics. There was lots of it in the Bronze Age, absolutely tons of it. Okay, but it was done via the story. It was complementing the story. The story was there, the characters were there, and they did things because they had opinions and they had ideology. But it wasn't given to us in a blunt way. I think some of the writers, but particularly over at Marvel, it's like a hammer. They're trying to hammer this thing in, and they're trying to fit in their ideology into their stories without thinking about how that's affecting the characters. They only see it, much like the journalists were talking about it. They're seeing it in one way. As I've said, I'm on record as saying this. I'm centrist as far as I'm concerned. Marvel should have had all these things that they're currently doing, and they should have done them on top of keeping the old way of doing things. So they should have kept a 616 universe and made it for anybody who wanted to be a fan of the 616 universe and the way, and people wandering around in spandex and all the rest of it, and keep it going, and then add to that. But of course, taking comics out of the newsstand didn't help. So you don't have a younger audience coming up behind you. All the comics that seem to be out at the moment all seem to be focused on an older demographic. So why would kids want to read them? And then the stuff they do put out for kids is condescending, to be perfectly honest. When I read comics as a kid, in Bronze Age comics as a kid, they had a good vocabulary in them. They were a bit cheesy, obviously, because of the way things were written, but they had stories that had politics in them, that had philosophy and ideology in them, but they did it through the story. They made it interesting. And of course, what that did was that meant that you softly took in these concepts and they became part of you, and you could then go out and either read more about them or find out more about them or just be aware of them. But if you're hitting someone over the head with a hammer, then they're not going to want to read it. Yeah, and on top of that, there's too much sitting around eating and drinking. But outside of that, like I said, Marvel should have done it all. And they should have had comics in spinner racks in the cinema, and they should have gone back to the newsstands. But that is never going to happen. So that's just an old man screaming into the void.
Well, yeah, I think it's pretty well proven that we're not going to, no matter how loud we shout, we're not going to be able to change the mind of DC and Marvel. But
No.
but like you said, there's always been politics in comics. I mean, even to some of the most innocent things, like even like X-Men or something, like there's a message there. And, you don't have to be like a socialist, liberal Democrat to agree that, racism is bad,
No, exactly. Yeah.
So it's like, there was stuff in there, but it was in the context of a good story and a fun story. And, it doesn't have to be like it is. So I don't know. I like that rant though about the journalism and stuff because there's actually it's kind of an injustice that's being done there. Like you said, there's a certain thing that journalism should be. There's a certain thing that comics should be, or just story in general. Maybe can be. So I don't know. There's a lot of things. Did you hear? I saw on Twitter, actually, of all places, yesterday. There's a I don't know I guess it's a comic company, Alliance Comics or something.
I just saw Dave in the chat mention it. Yeah, I'd seen it. Is it the Brightwisers we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm not really sure who the people are or anything, but that's pretty awesome. Like, I'm looking forward to go buy comics from Walmart.
Well, that's what we need. We need more of that.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly honest, that's why like the whole beer virus thing is a terrible thing. But with every downfall, there's opportunities afterwards. Do the best you can, but pick out the opportunities, and there will be opportunities here. The comic book industry was already going through rocky times, let's say, and this has really hit it hard. But I think there's a real opportunity for another Wild West, as it were, for comic books, for independent comic books, and they're doing it from a position where they were actually deep into the comics industry, and they obviously have connections, which is difficult for the rest of us. But at least they're doing something, and I think the rest of us can see that there's opportunities out there for all of us to go out and do something new, something different. As much as I love, Batman and Spider-Man and X-Men, I can't say that they're getting tired, because there's always an opportunity to refresh these things without changing the core character, I might add. There's always ways of making these things fresh, but they have been around a long time, and people are always hungry for new things. So let's all get out there and give them some new stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Oops, excuse me. Yeah. I think that's a good place to kind of end it off to a certain degree. We have a lot of opportunity there, and what Russ just said, I think is great. And thank you for everybody in the chat. There's a lot of cool conversation going on in there. You guys rock. And once again, Russ, where can people find you?
You can find me on YouTube. I'm Comic Book BlackBelt. You can pick me up at russleach.com, comicbookblackbelt.com. My book, Only Death Can Save Us.com. There's an email subscription list there. Please sign up. Also, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just come over and follow me on there. And I'm always keen to talk to people about comic books and comic book art.
Yeah, awesome. And if you're into, nice, tasty pencils, go over to, I'd say go over to Russ's Facebook page. I found some pretty cool things over there that he's been working on. So yeah, and you guys know where to find me, DonkeyJawProjects.com, and Marsh Comics on Twitter. I've been a little more active on Twitter lately, having fun, hoping I don't get, fall into the pit of despair, but having some fun there. And also on Instagram, Marsh Comics. And other than that, thank you guys for hanging out. Just before I go, at some point this weekend, I haven't decided if it's Saturday or tomorrow or Sunday or not, but this is the 99th episode, so the next episode is episode 100. So we're going to try to do something special for that. So I'd love to have you guys to come and hang out, and I think we'll have a group here, chatting about whatever, and it's going to be fun. So other than that, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll talk to you on the next one.
Cheers. See you.
Peace out.